Hey guys, welcome back to the Rhythm Section, brought to you by The Mind Refinery. I'm Kyle Bodanis. For this episode, we dip back into the creative world of Kanye West with a look at Watch the Throne, his stadium rap collaboration with Jay-Z. We're going to dive deep into the album, its influence on hip-hop, and the blockbuster tour that took the world by storm. This episode was recorded earlier this year when we were trying to get our audio reps in, but I think you'll enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you have time, follow The Mind Refinery on social media. And now, here's the show. All right, here for part 3 of our epic deep dive into the creative world of Kanye West are Andrew Lanza, Mind Refinery Creative.
Hey.
And Coburn Blair, the ever-talented.
How you guys doing?
So last episode, we looked at 808s and Heartbreak and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, likely the most influential period of his career, where he imposed his will on the sound of pop music. This episode, we're going to look at Watch the Thrones, which is his collaboration with Jay-Z, and Kanye West's protest record of sorts, Yeezus. So let's start with Watch the Thrones, guys. What were our initial thoughts on this record?
Fuck, I love it. I think it's a great effort by these two. I know there was like a kind of lukewarm reaction when they dropped Ham initially, but honestly, I love Ham. There's a couple soft spot, like a couple low points on the album that I'm sure we'll cover, but overall, I mean, it's two titans at the top of their game collaborating, and what I like about it too is these guys like Jay and Ye, they were, for pretty much this whole album, they were in the room together. They're not like collaborating over the internet and like sending each other files and shit. Like they were in hotel rooms and like recording studios, like banging this shit out.
Yeah, I think I love this album. I think it was them kind of reacting to Drake, which they had said like since they were kind of have felt like threatened in their positions of like superiority in the rap game. Then you have them kind of touching on like current topics. They're touching on like things that kind of occurred that year, or like things that they were feeling, maybe some of their fears going forward. And they're also playing with a lot of like new producers, playing with like sounds of the time. Like I think some of that kind of dates the record, but you have like a Lex Luger, and you have like 2 songs that kind of like sample dubstep or like the house music that was popular at the time. So I love this album going back, like one of my favorite concert experiences as well.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that.
Yeah, so I love the record when it came out, and I still think it stands the test of time today.
Yeah, me too. I agree with that. It's definitely timeless, and I know. Hopefully one day we'll get to Watch the Throne too.
The overall just bangerness of this kind of makes up for its soft spots, I believe. I think maybe you could probably scale back on a couple tracks. I know like that was kind of actually one of the biggest criticisms like of the people who didn't think it was like too awesome, is that just there's a little bit of filler in it, and I love it. Like No Church in the Wild was the first song I heard on it, and it was just, I'm like, this is fucking sick. And the Frank Ocean contributions to this.
I was gonna say, I fucking love Frank, man, so much.
His stuff on this is really good. And I like the idea.
Made in America too.
Yeah, Made in America is my favorite track on it. We're like, which, I mean, we can open this up into the our standout tracks. Made in America is my favorite because I kind of like how it's this look at the difficulty of making it in the United States, especially, for Black people. And, he talks about like Coretta Scott King and Martin Luther King and all these people, Malcolm X, who came before and made it work despite, massive issues, which is in contrast, well, not in contrast, but maybe a little more of a humble approach to the success they boast on this record, which is, where they've, N-Word in Paris, they talked about it in, I saw a Kanye West interview with it where he's talking about it's almost like they were using it to like laugh in the face of this like elite group who thinks that, Black people shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? And shouldn't be part of this. And I know Jay-Z also said, this whole thing is pushing against that idea of that it's not good to like, nice things if you're a Black person, and like the idea of being, people make fun of the idea of being smart as if you're, not down. And like, he kind of was like, we can be part of that whole, we can be capitalist too, if you will. So like I really really love this. Otis was fucking amazing. I love that, and it's funny the dynamic between the two on this record, because Jay-Z's the business runner who's like, we got to try to be frugal, and Kanye West is like, we're gonna get these fucking samples. I don't care if it costs hundreds of thousands of extra dollars, and I love it. I love how the themes of the record are really kind of transmitted into the live show as well, especially like the idea of like No Church in the Wild, and I loved it. I really really enjoy it. What for you guys are some like standout tracks that really got you on this?
Yeah, I think Murder to Excellence, you like can't really not mention. Obviously,
so crazy.
Yeah, like Otis, like just the visuals for Otis, like them chopping up the Maybach into like whatever, like kind of Mad Max inspired like Road Warrior cars.
Directed by Spike Jonze.
Yeah, Spike Jonze. So I don't know. There's a lot, like Paris, I think obviously, but I think there's only like on the version of the album that I still have on my like computer and iTunes, like I just took the track Lift Off of there because I don't ever need to hear that song ever again.
I agree. I think I'm like a casual Beyonce fan at best, but like that song is like a no-go from me. Even today I was listening to it again. I'm like,
it's not worthy of how good people are on that, of the talent on that song.
Yeah, it's not like a bad song, I don't think, but it's not good.
No, it's Beyonce, Jay, and Kanye. There's a whole other level you have to get to if you have those people.
Yeah.
I would say it's like one of the worst songs that all three of them have been a part of.
I completely agree, and I didn't really like the like Carter's record they released a couple years ago. I wasn't really into that, but this was this is definitely part of it, because I mean, especially considering what Beyonce is going to do. I mean, she's do Lemonade. It's going to be crazy. We need a better Beyonce showing.
As far as my favorites, definitely Paris, like just huge banger. But then I don't know, it's a little funny, but who gonna stop me? Like honestly, that song gets me fired up. Just like the beat, like it's like a bit of a silly beat. It's like kind of over the top and a little out of place with the rest of the album, I feel like. But I don't know, I just really like that track. I think it's there's some good bars on it. And I mean, the hook is killer.
Ham is the only one I'm like. Ham, Lift Off, and I don't like New Day. I like that
Ham.
much.
I don't
like Ham. I don't like.
I love that like chanting epic chorus. Like I don't know.
I think that the title aptly describes the delivery. It's just too not enough. Too much bombast. Not enough substance. But but you know what though, man? Honestly, this is a fucking great record. I thought that it got a little bit too much. I think it got hammered a little bit too much. I thought it was really good. There's still songs in this that we're listening to this day, and that for me is kind of the thing that really kind of is what is important, that people are still listening to these tracks. And I do think it sounds dated, but I'm still dipping in and listening to these. And if these songs are coming on the radio, which they do, I'm not turning.
Well, I think like you have like RZA on there, you have Q-Tip, obviously Kanye West's productions there, and then you have like they sample like Flux Pavilion, they sample a Cassius record on Why I Love You. So some of those tracks do sound dated, but some of them are super timeless and like stand out and like would fit in on something today. And I think it's also hard because this record is in the shadow of Dark Twisted Fantasy. Like this is a record for something like 9 months or like 8 months after that. So, and some of the songs were recorded at the same time too. So,
yeah, I think there's always when you put out a records like 808 and then My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, you have to try to compete with yourself. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for songwriters, musicians of Kanye West's caliber, right? It's like, how are you going to live up to the previous things that you've done, and you're setting your own. And that's why I kind of think it's ingenious that his previous records kind of have always kind of set the tone of what he was going to do next, especially in the early part of his career, whereas it kind of is deviating from that a little bit here, where there's more wild experimentation, where there's more just, we're going to do whatever the fuck we want. and I enjoy that. Now I want to like thematically, there's some huge differences of this. The term luxury rap thrown at this album. Thematically, what do we think is the big differences between the previous works?
Well, I mean, this album, I think my biggest critique of this album is, to put it bluntly, it's a little bit up its own ass. Like the whole like luxury rap thing, yeah, like we get it. Like you're like you're elite. At least they're saying some other stuff, not just that they're elite. But I don't know, like the whole like from a visual standpoint, the design of it. I know when the album dropped on vinyl, it was like over $200 at stores just for wax and cardboard. You know what I mean? Like it's a sick layout and shit. But I don't know. I just felt like at times it went a little bit overboard with the whole quote luxury rap type thing. I mean, I have no like I can't relate to that at all. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think this album is almost like a love letter to like black capitalism, and like now I think post this album they're both like technically billionaires, or Forbes would kind of place them there. So you have Jay-Z kind of doing his art talk, and I think in the kind of collection of Jay-Z albums that were coming out this time, like this blows like Blueprint 3 and Magna Carta like completely out of the water.
that's what I was gonna ask. So, but before Jay-Z's album before this was Blueprint thing 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Magna Carta was it 12? Was it just after? Like a
yeah, it's just after this, because I think Holy Grail was recorded during these sessions, which would go on to
that's
the single for Magna Carta.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mention that, because I think that's getting to kind of a a mediocre period for Jay-Z. And I mean that's what happens though, you know what I mean? Like you want to stay relevant and you're putting out music, but maybe you're not, at the top of your game. I don't know, like do we think Jay-Z even at this point is capable of another big one, or do we think that like lightning in a bottle period of his time has passed?
Well, I think what's kind of the difference between Jay-Z at this time is that like from this album, some of the themes that he touches on this album, like kind of going forward in his life, kind of aging up, talking about like what like him having kids might look like. Those albums are kind of come back full circle on 444, which I think is one of Jay-Z's best albums. So I think those themes don't really they weren't as prevalent in Blueprint 3 or Magna Carta, but then they came back around in 444, and also like the arc of his black capitalism kind of narrative that's like first introduced on this album, or like kind of is thematic on this album.
It's interesting because if you mentioned 444, because I really enjoy 444. My like if you were to take 4 like timestamps of Jay-Z's career, I would take Reasonable Doubt, Blueprint, Black Album, and 444, and say this is Jay-Z. And I believe that would accurately reflect what he's doing. So it was good that he put that out. Also, like the collab with Damian Marley on that, Bam, I fucking love.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's so good. And also, like, I think with that record and maybe this is the problem with this one, it's that record is extra personal, right? And that's
super personal,
right? And that's the kind of stuff where that's why I like Black Album too, because like December 4th, you're hearing about like he's telling the story about him when he was born and his parents and his life, and like that's what I want.
His mom and everything.
Exactly, and that's what I want to hear from Jay-Z, because like he's a storyteller. You know what I mean? He's the best when he's storytelling, and I think they both are. But Jay-Z is one of the best storytellers of our time, and I think that he's able to take people to what that is. And Watch the Thrones doesn't have that element, and that was a big criticism of it as well. Is the two big ones were album length, and these guys aren't telling stories like they normally do. It's more boasting. Obviously, the cultural importance of it in terms of like outlining black success and a more successful place for black people in capitalism is important. I think it's more along the lines of the execution. Like it doesn't really hit on how important that idea is.
Yeah, I totally agree. As far as your question, can Jay make, another album, another big album? I fucking hope so, man. Like I would love to hear another like really good album from that guy. Who knows if it's gonna happen? How long was 444 was his last one, or I guess the Carters, but like
I think it was
solo album.
2016 444. Yeah, I think that was the last solo.
That was 2017. Okay, I just
2017.
I think Jay might have more too to say in like this political climate. That like because like 444 was like the end of the Obama era, so I think he might have something more to say in this climate that might fit his kind of narrative and his rise.
Very true. Very true.
Post first black president, and then looking at what the condition is for black people still in the United States. So like that's a lot of what people are talking about right now, is that everyone thought that when that happened that everything was going to be kind of work out, but it's like there's still the issues. And I think the whole, it's when you listen to 444, I see, though he really gets on these ideas about like the need for wealth in the black community and stuff like that. Like I think that is what should be injected into here. Like there is a cultural impetus for it, you know what I mean, and a societal impetus for it. And I think that that's more what I think people were lacking in this, whereas 444 really kind of looked at that and really spoke about that and was unabashed about talking about it.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. But back to Kanye, what would you say like Kanye is saying on this album? Because I think there's a bit of a difference between what Kanye and Jay-Z are saying on Watch the Throne. I think Jay-Z's kind of leaning towards like, like when he talks about Merge to Excellence, like when you see me, see you, like see like wealth, and he's kind of like power to the people. He's kind of talking about like what Black excellence is. And I think sometimes Kanye becomes a bit personal on the album, but he's also still at a very hedonistic kind of phase in his career. In terms of like the subject matter of like the last two albums. So I think there's a bit of a contrast between what they're both talking about.
That's actually a really good point. They're at definitely, because he's kind of the big brother, Jay-Z. And they came from very different places. So, and I think that along, even from a thematic standpoint for both of their albums, for, the breadth of their careers, it kind of really shows the contrast between it. And Kanye West is still going with that thing where he's only right now, in the last few years, 3 years from this time, evaluating what the bad parts of fame and celebrity and all these kind of things, whereas before it was like the ambition. So but with this he's starting to evaluate yet, but there's still, you're right, that hedonistic idea of it, you know what I mean? And I think like a track like Murder to Excellence is really kind of contrasts, you definitely within that, between their verses and stuff, see the difference between the two and like where they're at from a career standpoint. But yeah, I mean the luxury rap thing, you know what I mean, do you think it effectively describes this style, or do you think that it's like a media concoction?
I think luxury rap is a good way to describe this, and I think it's the subject matter of sometimes like what Jay-Z's talking about in art, like the real keys and stuff like that the average person doesn't really know what those things are or necessarily care unless they're maybe an art major or like into like fine art or high art. And then also like that act of taking like a $200,000 car in the video for Otis and whatever, but then they donate it to charity, which is like obviously a very noble thing. But I think for most people they kind of lost touch on this album. So I think a lot of people kind of felt like they couldn't relate to the themes of this album.
Yeah, that's definitely what I felt. I felt disconnected from it for sure. Like from a musical standpoint, I can enjoy it and I can, listen to what they're saying and I can enjoy it. But I mean, I have I can't relate to it.
What do you think about the collaboration with Jay-Z in terms of them working together, from their work together over the course of their career? Is this the highlight, or is this the most constructive use of that collaboration, or is there other areas where you really kind of see what they're capable of together?
I would say if you were to ask me what the highlight is, I don't know. I would have to probably say I think it's Monster on Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Even though you have other people on it, I don't know. I just feel like that's like such a huge J verse and like such a huge Kanye verse. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is probably like, other than that, like the standout project. They've been working together since the beginning, so it's kind of hard to pick one. Lucifer, that's a great track.
Yeah, Lucifer's
I
amazing.
love that track.
I would say like Kanye and Jay-Z, obviously the Blueprint is like some of their best like kind of Kanye production and Jay rapping, and like that's like
Mhm.
part of the prime of Jay-Z's career, and like the first prime of his career. But on this, I think you have Kanye getting the best of this era's Jay-Z, and I don't think too many people were getting like this quality Jay-Z at this time. So I think this is like the height of it, because you have, I think before this it was obviously Dark Twisted Fantasy, and then there's a period where they're not like collaborating like outwardly as much, and then before that it's like Late Registration, because I don't think Jay-Z shows up on for like 808s or Graduation.
I'm gonna ask this: do you think that they work best together when they are on equal footing, or when another person is supporting the other?
I think that's a great question. I think if I had to like boil it down, I'd probably say my favorite works are when Jay-Z's kind of at his peak and Kanye's kind of trying to get on, like Blueprint or like Black Album, his contributions there. But I would say this might be the zenith of their collaboration, and I think it's withstands the test of time and their collaborations like before this and after. I think this is like a peak.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, but like I like the dynamic of them both being like both stamping their name on the album. You know what I mean? Whether like if it's a Kanye album or if it's Jay album, um, there's a different dynamic depending on whose album it is. But like with this album, they're like kind of on equal footing. So I feel like they're almost kind of like trying to like almost one up each other the whole time. There's definitely some healthy competition, or maybe at times maybe not so healthy, but there's definitely competition on the album, and I think that kind of um, they like sharpened each other's skills and honed each other's art just by having that competition going.
Well, that's the goal, is that something like this, it brings out the competition, brings out the best. It's supposed to bring out the best in people. I think for me, it's, to quote Lauryn Hill, two MCs can't occupy the same space at the same time. It's against the law of physics, and I think that I personally feel that their best work together is always when one of them is in support of the other, because I think they're so wild. I think that there may be. It's weird because I do enjoy this record, but it's almost like I don't think you'll ever be able to utilize the best of both of them at the same time, unless they have their own space to fulfill their own narrative.
Who would you say performs better on this album?
Jay-Z.
From what standpoint? From an MC standpoint?
Yeah, lyrically maybe. I think.
Oh man, Jay, you always got to give it to Jay. I feel like, yeah, like
it's
like
hard because
Jay's
Jay-Z's
like,
a better rapper. He's a better rapper.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And he can just spit it off, off the cuff kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's almost no competition when it comes to like the rapping. But when you compare everything else versus, it's like maybe from like a technical standpoint, like a producing standpoint, obviously then you'd have to give it to Kanye. But yeah, I mean, they each brought their own thing to the table. Not to say that Kanye didn't go hard. Like he has some bars on this album. Don't get me wrong.
No, absolutely, yeah, I agree with that. Like it's not that he isn't good. Like if you were to let out who's a better, set up who's a better rapper, obviously it's Jay-Z, but who has the bigger artistic vision is clearly Kanye West. That's why, like, on paper for me, that's why for me, like Kanye West brings in collaborators, Jay-Z requires the collaborators. You know what I mean? Like they fuel. Like, for example, Blueprint without Kanye West doesn't sound anything like it does. You know what I mean? So I think more, that on paper this was good. It's like a super team in sports, but it didn't completely pan out. But what it did have, which I think everyone expected, was bangers. You are literally getting the most commercial, radio friendly aspects of these two guys put together.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like there's also like you have like commercial records, but there's not like one record that I think like obviously like Paris and Otis like charted well and stuff, but I don't think there's a record that's like sounds like it was made for the radio.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean maybe Otis,
Otis,
and
I
like
think.
maybe like to a lesser extent Ham, even though it was kind of rejected. I can see that that's what they're kind of trying to tap into.
No Church in the Wild for me is one that's following along like Jesus Walks and Diamonds, where it's like this widescreen epic. I think it's a statement. It's why I think like the first I enjoy like there's tracks like in the second half I enjoy the first half of the record the most. They kind of come out hard and they kind of set a tone and an idea going forward. I just don't think that they kind of fulfill it. I like that I mean like for me like I think some of these are also built for a stadium. You know what I mean? Like this is like No Church in the Wild is big. It's a big song. It's there's a grandeur to it. And I kind of want to move into that. Like, what did we all went to watch the Thrones? Like, what do we think about it? Like, what do we think about it from the spectacle standpoint?
You guys saw it at ACC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First night or second night?
First night.
Same.
First night too.
Yo, Kyle, I knew you at the time. I guess we just like I didn't know that
you didn't just know me. We were friends at the time.
But how did we not? How did we not know we were both going to the show?
I don't know. I feel that way. I have no idea.
I don't know. I think you know what? Maybe that was second semester of first year where we were in different classes, where it's like we didn't like lose touch, but we weren't like seeing each other every day.
No, this was after. This was after school.
Oh yeah, that's right. This was after school.
That's why it's all screwy. It was after school. This tour was in 2012, I think, because it came out.
Yeah, right.
Right. I think it was 2012. Coburn, do you remember when in the year this took place? The tour?
It was
I can't remember.
Winter. I think it was winter time.
Because the record came out in the summer of 2011, I'm pretty sure, and then they toured it, and then they came here.
I'm googling this.
Yeah, we got this. But in terms of live shows, like, what did you guys think about it?
Without hyperbole, November 23rd, 2011.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway,
so I was cooking. I came down to see the show. Now I remember.
Like without hyperbole and like literally I've seen in my lifetime well over 100 concerts. I'd hard pressed to say it'd be less than 200, but this was the best concert I've ever seen in my life, from a showmanship standpoint, from a stage design standpoint, from a performance, just literally like everything. It's also, not only is it the best show I've ever seen, it's hands down the most minus like festivals, it's the most expensive show I've ever seen. I went the first night. I think me and my buddy for nosebleeds, we spent like $250. And while we were at like before the show, his girlfriend's friend or something said they had tickets for the next day for us if we wanted, but they would be another $250. And it was that good that I didn't do it, but I seriously considered spending another $250 to see that same show again the next night. It was that good.
I think that's why I have a hard time remembering if I went first night or second night, because I remember I had an offer for another set of tickets, and I can't remember. Like, I know I didn't do it both nights, but I was like seriously considering it because it was just worth it.
My girlfriend at the time bought me the tickets because we had a fight. I now remember. And it was good too. I was not floors or like low. I was like,
I was nosebleeds. I was fucking.
I was like in between nosebleeds and like the lower part. So I was like, I guess if this was 300 level, I can't even. If I'm speaking in hockey terms, I had Reds. This is, if I was to say, what is the best collaboration between the two that I'm more looking at now that I think of it, this stage show, because this wasn't disappointing.
You got like, not only do you have the album, which is pretty much all bangers, but then you have like a solid best of each artist, and like you have them doing each other's parts and each other's songs and stuff like that. Like, you know what I mean? It was
like he played stronger. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was intense. Like that's kind of the thing that, like, did you guys expect them to play as much of their own catalogs as you thought?
Well, yeah, I mean, the album's only so long. They'd have to fill, the rest of the show up. That's pretty much what I was expecting as far as like each of their own catalogs go.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just blown away. I was just like shock and awe the whole time, just like watching the stage like change and the light show, and like just hearing all
the
these songs.
stages.
I remember hearing about how many times they would do Paris and other cities, and like kind of like in anticipation to it come to Toronto.
How many times did they do it? 3 times? I think they did it 3 times on our show on the first night.
I feel like they did it more than 3. I think it was like, I want to say like 6 times or something the first.
I was feeling good that show. I had taken some things before that concert, and yeah, it worked out. It worked out quite nicely. It was a feast for the eyes. The light show, and just like I remember there was like one point where like Jay was rapping. I can't remember what song it was because I mean it's been it was 2011, so this was like 9 years ago now. But Jay is rapping, and I remember there's these like strobing like lasers going over top of him, and it looked like he was a literal fucking like graffiti painting, but on a stage. And my mind couldn't understand how they were doing it. Like there were so many things that were just so well done.
I love like the razors.
Concert.
I feel like there was a part where Kanye was kind of like almost in the crowd, and he was on like this like raised up, and Jay was rapping behind him, and then they kind of like swished. I don't know. The graphics and the whole stage design was just like absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, they each had their own They each had their own giant stage riser things with like giant LCD screens bordering the fucking like the risers, and they were playing like sharks and fucking jaguars and shit.
That's what I liked about it. It's like when it's like it's that all the imagery. I think that maybe it's just that like a studio isn't the proper size to take all of like to contain them. Yeah, that you need a fucking huge stage for them to truly coexist together. Because I think like as much as it's luxury rap, it's also like stadium rap. Yes, I think that's a more appropriate. I think that's a more appropriate term, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I wish I could see it again. Like, was there? I know like Paris's like concert footage. Is there like a full taping of any of the shows? Like, did they ever put that out? I would love to see that.
No, I would buy like a DVD or Blu-ray or whatever to see that though. That'd be amazing.
They didn't put out a live cut of this?
Like a professionally shot. I'm sure Kanye would get like some like French cinematographer to shoot it or something like that. But
he cloned Godard just to direct it.
Exactly.
It's not even the footage is probably still out there somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
100%.
It's there.
100%.
If they have Michael Jordan footage just sitting in someone's basement, then they have fucking Kanye's definitely saving the footage. He's probably like, make sure you get all of that. Make sure you get all of that. I don't even know if we're going to release it, but make sure you get all of it. This, when we talked in the first part about the size of which Kanye West wanted to do his stage performances and what he was talking about, this is the zenith of it. This is it. Like, this is all of it together, smashed in together, Givenchy record friggin' cover, like the state, like just the design, the way the LEDs were set up, the double risers, everything they were doing. It feels like this was a moment that Kanye West had kind of been preparing for.
Yeah, I think I would agree. And like, I don't think this is an album that like can exist within a vacuum. And like, it's like the accumulation of all of Kanye's work and kind of like his, even like when he talks about like Big Brother on that song, like this is kind of like, like the physical manifestation of that song of him, like, kind of ascending to the same level as his brother.
So what about the other collaborations on this album? Like what other ones stood out to you, beyond obviously, the Jay-Z Kanye West thing?
Well, we talked about it before, but like the 2 Frank Ocean tracks, I think really stand out to me. This is Frank's coming off of
Channel Orange. It's before Channel Orange. It's a year before Channel Orange, actually.
This was before Channel Orange.
This is before Channel Orange, yeah. Because this is just coming off of his mixtape and like kind of the Odd Future stuff. So people.
Oh right. What was the mixtape called?
Nostalgia Ultra.
Yes.
Nostalgia Ultra. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you. Yeah. So he was coming off Nostalgia Ultra. That's actually, I have it back afterwards. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's fucking dope. That they're putting him on like that. Just off like the mixtape. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I think those are probably my favorite collabs on the album.
I'm just pro more Frank Ocean at any time.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, like Lex Luger, having him on there, even though I don't love him the most, like it was kind of a moment for him, and it was like the beat was reminiscent of like he was doing Rick Ross and Waka Flocka at the time, so his sound was kind of everywhere. So like them kind of tapping him to have him on here, but also like just 88 Keys, like the Neptunes are on here, No IDs on here, who would go on to do 444, Q-Tips on here, RZA, and you have like a early Southside, like, and then Swiss Beats. I think he has 2 beats on here.
Mhm.
Obviously, Welcome to the Jungle, and I think he had a hand in producing another record as well. But I don't know. I think the production like just scaled the whole thing up like to a different level as well.
Yeah, and also even like down to the samples, you know what I mean? Like the Flux Pavilion sample, the Otis Redding. I mean, having to sample it so much that you have to credit him.
Yeah, he's featured.
It's a feature, so it's pretty crazy. I thought the Flex Pavilion sample is pretty deft. That was on Who Gonna Stop Me? Yeah.
Yeah, Who Gonna Stop Me? Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was a really good sample. And then I think like LaRue's on here. I think she's singing somewhere on this, or her name's Ellie or whatever. But yeah, I think she's on here singing as well.
This record also kind of like provides a good interlude into the next kind of situation too. Like, I mean, we've been kind of at the end of all these records looking at like where he is after this. And I mean, it's a massive tour. It's huge. The album is still huge despite, not being, I mean, but also like with Kanye West records, the only really place to go is down after, Twisted Fantasy. So, I mean, at some point you're going to come to Earth. Although for him, it's not really that much coming to Earth. So I don't know, like, how do you think this sets him up moving forward? Or is this just kind of like an interlude? Is this just a thing he did? Why did he do this?
Yeah, I would say this is almost an aside to what Kanye was doing, because it feels like so different and so like it's so much more grandiose, I think, than it's weird because this album owes a lot to Dark Twisted Fantasy, but also feels kind of far removed from it in a lot of ways. It feels
it's a
like
lot cleaner. I feel like it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a very clean, it's very polished, it's very produced. Not to say that Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy wasn't produced, obviously, but this is just a very I don't know. That's the best way to describe it. It's like very clean. It's a very clean album.
I think that's a good note because one thing that I like about Kanye West is even though he is, a world-class producer, he's still able to leave the blemishes on pieces of music where it doesn't sound too slick. He won't overdub vocals 5 times when it's not necessary, but he will where it is. And I think he's really good at understanding where, if something is not perfect at a certain point, that it actually improves the record and adds character.
Yeah, he can leave that roughness in when he needs to.
Okay, guys, before we move on, what I wanted to do is I want to talk about what do we feel the influence of this record is? How did this record affect what happened afterwards? Especially the idea of big double headlining tours, the collaboration records, hip hop duos. Did it have an effect, or is this imagined? What do we think?
I think this album, like, you can't understate this album's influence. Like, obviously, hip hop is a collaborative art form, but I think in the wake of this album, you have a group like Run the Jewels in 2013. Then you have Drake and Future kind of pairing off together to do What a Time to Be Alive, and then kind of continue their work. And in the last 3 years, you have Huncho Jack, which is Quavo and Travis Scott. You have Young Thug paired off with Chris Brown, and he's paired off with
Madlib and Freddie Gibbs.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Alfredo. I love the name of that record.
That record is amazing.
It is so good. Lanza, if you haven't heard Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and Madlib,
I have not.
First of all, best cover ever. It's like a puppet with a bowl of fettuccine Alfredo. It's like strings, like a puppet, or like the Godfather fucking thing, and then it's just a bowl of fettuccine Alfredo.
Okay, I got it. I'll be listening to this tomorrow. You're gonna get a text from me tomorrow being like, "Yo, what was that album?" And that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Future and the Future and Drake example is really good because that's a direct, I mean, even kind of look at the cover.
Yeah, like the cover is also like very like reminiscent of the album, and which is fair because like Drake influenced this album getting made, so I think it kind of all comes full circle there. But then like Kanye and Jay-Z kind of take this idea and they run off to do like the Carters and Kids See Ghosts both like without each other with a new collaborator.
Yeah, I was definitely going to mention that. But it's almost like kind of like Beatles and Beach Boys going on with influencing back and forth.
Yeah. And then you have the Rolling Stones just trying to be wizards because the Beatles were wizards and shit. The fucking stealing. It's so funny. I watched this documentary and it was just talking about how like every time the Beatles did something, the Rolling Stones ended up doing it. It's interesting, that comparison, because this idea of influencing back and forth, and Coburn, you mentioned how this was them kind of looking at Drake and being like, we got to take we got to strike back almost, and reassert supremacy. And it's almost like that is the best, like I feel like music gets really good when you're doing that, when there's this one upsmanship, and
yeah, it's that competition we were talking about. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because because we talked about some of the failings of this record, but then when I think of What Time to Be Alive, it's like it kind of makes more sense those two talking like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the luxury rap makes sense for Drake and Future. Like I don't feel like it's out of place for them. For these guys, I do feel it's a little bit out of place.
Yeah, I would say too, like with everything this record kind of influenced, like there's some stuff that like still kind of has existed to this day. But I think a fatigue kind of set in around like 2018 or 2019 of these like duo albums, because everyone was just doing them at that point, and it didn't feel as special as Watch the Throne did, because Watch the Throne at the time was like, oh, like these guys are coming together, like two of like my favorite rapper and my other favorite rapper doing an album. And then it was like a bunch of people started to do those albums, and they're like, oh well, I don't really want to hear X and Y together, like I don't care that much anymore. That's
a really good point too, because you get that friggin' like super advanced consumer capitalism part of the music industry where an idea comes up, then it goes through its generational iterations until it's so oversaturated that it gets spit out. And that this is a good example of this, and that's the big thing all those other collaborations don't have, is how special this is and how much of an event this was. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.